Hello everyone, Luciano Oliveira, Oliveira Lawyers. We are starting one more live stream. Today is Sunday, March the 30th, 3:30 Rio de Janeiro time. And we're gonna be, as usual, giving a priority to participation from those who are joining us now. We do keep a backlog of questions and interesting cases to discuss. But if you are here with us, you can go directly to our chat window and enter a topic of your interest for us to discuss. And talking about our chat, let's take a look and see if there are any participation so far. Hey, we have a Bill, so we're starting with the right foot. Bill says, Oi Luciano, hoping we get a lot of people for the live stream today. So am I, Bill. Thank you for your support. We also have the Drunk Dragon. Boa tarde, Drunk. Is the fine for overstaying still capped at 10,000 reais? A Brazilian consul in France told my dad that there is no maximum or no maximum anymore. So, Dragon, last time I checked, there was a cap at 10,000 reais. I don't know if there was like a recent change. But traditionally, or let's say for several years, this cap has been applied, and I don't have any notice of a change on the cap. So just sharing with those of you who don't know, if you overstay in Brazil, you're going to accrue a fine of up to 100 reais a day, which would be roughly like 17 or 18 US dollars a day. And this is going to increase for as long as you are overstaying. But there is a cap for 10,000 reais. So if you accrue 10,000 reais, then you would not like increase the penalty that you're going to need to pay. We did have a very extreme case here in Brazil, and that case was resolved last year when the U.S. citizen hired us. He is an individual in his like mid-20s, and he was in Brazil for several years, believe it or not, outside of his status. So he came illegally to Brazil. He did overstay, and he wanted to get back on track. So we took him to the Polícia Federal. And at the Polícia Federal, he received a fine for the 10,000 reais, despite being in the country for several years. He did pay the 10,000 reais, which is a little bit less than $2,000, and he was given 60 days to leave the country. But interesting enough, during those 60 days, he was kind of back on a legal status, even though he would need to leave the country within 60 days. And then we applied for the digital nomad, and he got approved for the digital nomad. So right now he's working with his family to get the funds required for the real estate investment route. So he doesn't need to keep renewing the digital nomad on a yearly basis, and he can get something more long-term that is going to lead him eventually to permanent residency and maybe even the citizenship. So there you go, Dragon. I hope that was helpful. Yokora, so good to see you here, Yokora. Same here. Yokora says, hello, Luciano, bon te ver. Pretty good to see you as well, Yokora. And while our participants warm up with their participations, I'm gonna share, as usual, news in Brazil, and very interesting. This is UOL. That's one of the largest news portals in Brazil, and you're gonna see the very first picture here is of President Trump, and the news reads, the United States are sending an alert to China. We're not gonna tolerate intervention. Maybe intervention is not a good translation. I would say influence of China in our hemisphere. All right, so it looks like there is a lot of articulation, particularly by Secretary Marco Rubio in terms of Latin America, and also because his family is actually from Cuba, if I'm not mistaken, and he does speak naturally like fluent Spanish. So the United States is like trying to recover its influence in Latin America in general. Right now, we have a President Lula in Brazil, which is antagonic to President Trump, because President Trump is right leaning and President Lula is left leaning. On the other hand, in Argentina, you have like a president who's also right leaning. So President Trump is like getting closer very fast to Argentina, and Argentina on its turn is kind of keeping a certain distance from Brazil, which is very interesting because Brazil and Argentina are neighbor countries, right? So here is the news. More news: Americans are going to Mexico to escape from Trump, right? I don't feel safe, right? Now, of course, and we do see here at the firm a high or an uptick in U.S. citizens, particularly going to Portugal, right? Like, I mean, those who are really afraid in a sense like of a more physical nature, they're usually going to Portugal. There are many U.S. citizens who don't feel comfortable about more like the political side of things, and then they also want to, come to Brazil. And it's very interesting, right? Like, I mean, when you see this news here, like, I don't feel safe in the U.S., so I'm going to Mexico, right? I mean, of course, like the United States is far from perfect. There are so many issues with the country, but I mean, it doesn't make much sense for one to say that this person is leaving the United States because she's going to feel safer in Mexico, right? Mexico has a huge level of violence by the drug cartels. Not only drug cartels, but robbery and all types of crimes, right? Like, I mean, so like to compare the United States to Mexico, it just doesn't make sense to me, if you allow me, right? But these are the two main news. There is a third one here about the United States to start the week. The United States are starting to charge the tariffs, right? So these are the very first three news under a picture. Of course, there is another headline over here. This headline in particularly is talking about the January the 8th, which was an event just like the one that happened in the United States, right, when protesters invaded the U.S. Congress, and there was the same thing in Brazil. Now, in Brazil, there is, like this dispute, not surprisingly, between the right and the left, because the right is saying, listen, there should be some kind of honesty. Like, I mean, you should let go of the persecution of, like literally thousands of people. And the left is saying, no, you should not give them a break. You should have them in jail pretty much forever, right? So this is like the main headline over here. But I hope you like when I bring those news. I think it does help with the understanding of the Brazilian culture, if you will. Let's take a look at the chat window. All right, retrieving the chat window. Okay, we have Dragon. Thank you. You answered my follow-up question about overstaying for a long time and then applying for the digital nomad visa. Yes, Dragon. So that's a current strategy. Dragon is asking, can you elaborate on the digital nomad visa that the client doesn't need to renew yearly? So, Dragon, there is such a digital nomad for Portugal. I apologize if I wasn't clear. In Brazil, you do need to renew on a yearly basis. So you get the digital nomad is just good for a year. Before the 1 year expires, you do need to renew. The renewal is pretty easy to accomplish. If you are in Brazil, you may still need to hire an attorney or a law firm just because we use the immigration system. The immigration system is not intuitive and it was not designed for end users, but the application is pretty easy. You don't need to renew the entire package. You just need to get criminal records from Brazil, because at the renewal, you're going to be living in Brazil. You're going to need to show that you're still working for an entity abroad, not in Brazil. And you still need to show that you have good financials. So, Dragon, pretty easy for the renewal. So, going back to the case that I was mentioning, what they are doing is like they are gathering funds to buy real estate, right? So when you buy real estate, you're going to be entitled to the real estate investor visa or residency. And this one, you don't need to renew on a yearly basis. When you buy a qualifying property, you're going to get, right off the bat, you're going to get 4 years to stay in Brazil. And by the end of these 4 years, you can actually secure the permanent residency, right? So basically, one application for the first 4 years, second application is going to get you the permanent residency. And within the permanent residency, after 4 years of permanent residency, you could potentially apply for the Brazilian citizenship, right? So this is a very common route, or this is potentially the main route for those who are not interested in residency by family ties, and is not a retiree as well. Nowadays, the retirement route, it also gives you down the line access to the permanent residency and potential the citizenship, but not the digital nomad. All right. Okay, we have Yui. Yui, welcome back. I'm almost certain that Yui has been here before. Yui is asking, digital nomad can be renewed every year, and then after you pass many years, you can apply for permanent residency. Nope, that's not correct, Yui. You can renew potentially yearly. There is always this discussion that you should be able to renew only once. But because the digital nomad was created under the prior administration, more specifically President Bolsonaro, and the current administration under President Lula doesn't have like a clear connection or any connection at all to the prior administration, the current interpretation that we see from the President Lula administration is that they don't mind digital nomads renewing the visa for more than once. It looks like the original plan by President Bolsonaro's administration, it was for a single renewal. Current administration is saying, listen, we don't really care as long as you keep meeting the requirements for you to keep renewing. Now, there is no expectation that the digital nomad will ever give you access to the permanent residency UE, all right? So just explaining that distinction. And maybe that's why the digital nomad is like the lowest hanging fruit in the Brazilian immigration framework. You don't need like to bend backwards to get approved, but at the same time, you're gonna get something that is always limited in time. Okay, Yui is following up with União Estável. Is the permanent residency tied up with it? If the couple breaks up, do they lose it? What about losing citizenship in this case? So Yui, yes, if you have União Estável, explaining to other participants here, União Estável is like a type of civil union, right? Or, in some states in the U.S., you're going to call it a common law marriage, right? In Brazil, we say União Estável, meaning that you have a couple who have been together for a while. And in Brazil nowadays, União Estável is pretty comparable to a traditional marriage. And from that perspective, even if you're not married, You could apply for residency based on marriage, even though instead of presenting a marriage, you're going to be presenting a união estável. So that's the nature of Yui's question. And he's asking, well, what happens if the couple breaks up? So if the couple breaks up, and that's going to be the same thing with marriage, if this is a recent thing, you're going to lose it and you're not going to be able to reapply. If you have been with this partner, if you have been with the residency based on the união estável or marriage, then after a few years, there's going to be a second path for you to apply, which is the residency for those who qualified for the permanent residency in the past, but no longer qualify. If I am not mistaken, you should have been a legal resident in Brazil for 2 years under either the marriage or under the união estável. If you've been for 2 years and then your relationship, is over, you can apply under this kind of fallback track. This fallback track is not really well known in our immigration framework. When we discuss with other attorneys, most of them, they don't know about this track. But yes, there is such a track, and this track basically says, well, if you did qualify for the permanent residency, but for some reason you no longer qualify, you can apply under this track, and then we're gonna evaluate on a case-by-case basis, and maybe give you the permanent residency pretty much because you've been living in Brazil as a permanent resident, right? So at this moment, it's no longer based on the prior relationship. It's more based on the link or on the relationship that you've been developing with the country, if you will. Citizenship, you never lose it just because, right, your relationship is over. So, let's say that's why when we have people, right, like who get the residency based on marriage, we always recommend, right, like you never know the future. So once you've been in Brazil for a single year as a permanent resident based on marriage, you have an opportunity to apply for citizenship in a single year, as long as you are able to communicate in advanced Portuguese. But once you secure the citizenship, even if your relationship is over, your citizenship naturally is not going to be revoked, right? You're going to remain as a citizen, and you don't need to renew things. You don't need to apply. You don't need to worry about the potential end of the relationship. So yes, applying for the citizenship whenever the opportunity arises, it's always a good step in our opinion. Serge Damal, welcome Serge. Serge says, good afternoon. Brazil residency might eat too much into my monthly retirement income. What are the possibilities or disadvantages of hiring your firm every year to extend my 90-day visa to 180 days? Serge, let's assume, right, like because you're talking about 180 days, I would assume you are a U.S. citizen. And there is a strategy, right? There is a strategy that works at least as of today. Whenever U.S. citizens are coming to Brazil, there are two caps in terms of how long you can stay in the country. There is one cap for 180 days throughout your immigration year. And by the way, immigration year is not the same thing as calendar year. Immigration year usually starts the first time you come to Brazil. And this is one of the caps, the 180 days, right? So if you come to Brazil like 10 times in the immigration year, like all the time that you spent in Brazil during those 10 trips, it may not exceed 180 days. Like if you try to come for, for another time and you expired your 180 days, the Brazilian immigration is not going to allow you to enter the country, and you're going to need to take a flight back to the United States, all right? So this is one of the two caps. The second cap is going to be the 90 days per trip. And interesting to note that you don't always get 90 days. An officer may decide to give you less than 90 days, but 90% of the time you're going to get the 90 days, right? And a strategy to avoid the need for you to extend from 90 to 180 is to basically leave the country and come back. And if you are thinking, well, but traveling back to the United States and then to Brazil is going to cost a lot of money. We have even a recommendation here. We say, listen, have you been to Argentina? Bariloche. Bariloche is such a nice city in Argentina. It's like a ski station. Like pretty a nice trip for a weekend, right? So instead of spending money with us to renew, to extend your stay, maybe you're just gonna use that money to take a trip to Argentina for the weekend. When you come back to Brazil, traditionally you're gonna get an additional 90 days, right? So you didn't spend the time, you didn't go through for the massive red tape. For this extension, you need to present a bunch of documents, you need to file an application, you need to attend an appointment. So instead of going through all of that nonsense, just use this money to go to Argentina for the weekend, come back to Brazil, and you should be good. All right, Serge. So there you go. That's our tip. Aaron, good to see you back, Aaron. It has been a while. Aaron is asking, does the renewal process change if the first digital nomad visa was from the consulate and you're renewing in Brazil? Aaron, it does not change because actually the only type of renewal you can get is in Brazil. Because if you got a digital nomad, let's say in New York, and then at the Brazilian consulate in New York City, and then you came to Brazil, you are unable to renew that through the consulate. You're going to need to renew locally in Brazil. So the only renewal for digital nomad visas are actually through the immigration in Brazil, okay? And a very interesting question, because like if you applied abroad or if you applied while in Brazil, this is not going to change the renewal. The renewal is going to be pretty much the same thing, either if you applied abroad or if you applied for the first time in Brazil. Pelo Mundo, can you go to Brazil on a tourist visa and before the 90 days are up, go to another country to renew your 90 days, or do you have to return? All right, Pelo Mundo. So it looks like we were connected, right? Like, because that's exactly the tip that I shared with Serge. You don't need to go back to your country of origin. Like if you travel to a neighbor country and you come back, guess what? You left Brazil, you're coming back. 90% chance that you're gonna get an additional 90 days, because the two caps, right? The two caps that we spoke about, one cap is the 180 days per 365 days or your immigration year, and the second cap is gonna be the 90 days. All right. Sharing, hi, good afternoon, Sharing has been here before, good to see you back. Clayton Rodriguez, so good to see you here, Clayton. Why do they use temporary residency rather than permanent? Why do they use temporary residency rather than permanent? Clayton, are you talking about the real estate investment visa? Let me know which track you're talking about, Clayton. All right. Because there are different tracks have different types of residency, and therefore if you tell me exactly which track you're talking about, then it's gonna make easier for me to understand your questions. But Clayton, let's say if you're talking about the marriage route, you go straight, usually you go straight to the permanent residency, all right? The temporary is going to be either something like the digital nomad. The digital nomad is always temporary, just 1 year. You have, for instance, the real estate investment route. First, you get 4 years of temporary residency, and then you can move it to the permanent. And other visas, they also use the temporary slash permanent later approach, such as the retirement route. Clayton, very good to see you over here. Nadia, hi, Dr. Oliveira. Robert had a consultation with you a few weeks ago. Glad to see you over here, Nadia. Good to hear about Robert. I would like to get back in touch by phone to clarify the hiring process in Portuguese. Please have your assistant email me. Yes, Nadia, I think this is if I'm not mistaken, right? But well, I shouldn't be discussing like clients' matters over here. But yes, absolutely. I think I know which case is this one, and I'm gonna be glad to ask my assistant to send an email to you and Robert, and we can certainly follow up. You're saying by phone, we always like to schedule our, either follow-ups or consultations by Zoom. I firmly believe that, like the visual communication does add a lot. And very often, as you probably know, whenever we have either a consultation or a follow-up, I usually share resources on the screen. I show you, for instance, the type of card you're going to get, the challenges of your process, or, how we can make your journey less burdensome. All right, Nadia? So just remember that this is usually a follow-up Zoom call. But yes, for sure, note taken, and we're going to get in touch with you guys to get this process started. Ronnie Dio, so good to see you here, Ronnie. What are your thoughts on a foreigner opening a business in Brazil? I like to open a music venue. My background is in music business, and I know Brazilians love a celebration. Yes. Ronnie, listen, there are, a music venue, I guess this would be something like a bar with live music, right? I mean, maybe you have a different idea. It's a very work intensive kind of business, right? Like it's not something that you can basically just set up and forget about. So you're going to be living that business day in, day out. But listen, if your background is in music business and you want to be involved in this type of activity, I mean, it does sound like a good match. On the other hand, Ronnie, I'm sure you heard before, like Brazil is usually tough on entrepreneurs and business people, particularly people from other countries, because like in the United States, it's so easy to run a business. When you come to Brazil, the environment is harsh, right? I mean, taxation is harsh. Workforce, there are, there is a really, really archaic type of, labor law. So, you can fire people, at will, like you can do in the United States. And if you fire people, they are not gonna think twice before suing you to take a second bite at the apple, right? Even when you follow every single requirement from the Brazilian law. And let me tell you, they are plenty. Usually, employees, they're still gonna sue you to take another bite at the apple, right? I've been there, my clients been there, and this is very troublesome to me whenever I see foreign citizens coming with a lot of goodwill, try to help the Brazilian economy, try to, develop a business. And I can tell, up front, like how much pain they are going to have to endure. Now, this said, I also need to share the other side. There are plenty of people making a ton of money in Brazil, Ronnie. So I'm not trying to dissuade you. I'm just trying to bring you a kind of, balanced view with the cons and pros. But yes, there are a lot of people making a lot of money in Brazil, and you can also make a lot of money in Brazil. But it's a much harsher environment, a much harsher business environment. So just giving you a heads up, um, as a spin-off of this reality, something that we don't handle here at the firm is going to be the investor visa for those investing in a company. We just don't think it's a good idea, to have a string attached between your immigration journey and your business, right? But we have a different take when you have a more traditional immigration route, such as residency by marriage or residency by investment in real estate, and then you take a shot at a business on the side, right? But not link it or with arms locked with your business, if that makes sense. All right, Yokota, would you be able to recommend a good realtor in Rio de Janeiro that we can connect with to start our search for a property? We will be in Rio for New Year's. Yes, Yokota, we traditionally do not share realtors, so I'm going to share one. I just don't want to come as a sign that we are always going to be sharing here. But the one that works with us, actually, right, is CamilaSonier.com. So this is her email address, okay? And she is actually licensed in Rio de Janeiro as a realtor, and she does work with some of our clients, right? And because we are now working in a more close relationship, in a sense that she's dedicating most of her time to our firm, we are kind of sharing. But usually, traditionally, we're not gonna share. Realtors unless we are working with you, because then we can also keep an eye at the realtor. Let's say if you ask for something for Fortaleza, Florianopolis, São Paulo, sometimes we share about a realtor. The realtor, ends up recommending a transaction or, a property that's not really something that we would agree with in terms of the recommendation. So that's why we don't like to share the recommendation unless we are also working with you on the purchase, right? But for Rio de Janeiro, there you go. There is Camila. You can talk to Camila, and she can probably, find a few properties for you guys to see for New Year's. All right, Yokota, there you go. Aaron, his name is Dio Ronnie James Dio. All right, Aaron. All right, that was a good one. Serge, clapping hands. Thank you, Serge, for participating. Ronnie, yes, Aaron, with love. There you go. I love to see people having fun here at the live stream. That's pretty rewarding to me. Right now we have 21 viewers as we speak, only 9 likes. So if you want to take a moment and please like our live stream, I would appreciate it. That helps with our business, and it also helps other people just like you to find our content. So yes, please take a moment and go there and hit that like button. I really appreciate it. Pelo Mundo, if you plan to get the Golden Visa but apply for it in Brazil, is it better to go ahead and get a normal visa or a tourist visa if you're not sure how long it will take to find a home to buy? Pelo Mundo, for sure. That's actually always my recommendation, right? Whenever you get started on the Golden Visa journey, my first recommendation is for you to get a digital nomad, because this is going to buy you a full year for you to find the ideal property, go through the closing without rushing, doing the closing by the books, because when you get to the point of applying for the Golden Visa, it's not at that point in time that you're going to need to think about the property, right? When you apply for the Golden Visa, there are very specific requirements for the property. There are very specific requirements for how you send the money. So all of those things, they need to be factored into when you are starting your Golden Visa journey. And therefore, the digital nomad is a very good match, because it is easy to obtain, and it does get you a full year in Brazil, allowing you to tackle the golden visa in a kind of not rushed manner and increasing your chances of securing the golden visa, if you will, pelo mundo. Really interesting question. Serge, clapping. Thank you, Serge. Clayton Rodriguez, I guess real estate, right, Clayton? Yes. So, yes, true for real estate. You get the 4 years. And the reason for that, Clayton, is because like they think if they give you the permanent residency, you're going to run to sell the property that you bought. So that was the reasoning from the Brazilian government. Let's first give them like 4 years, so we know that they are going to keep the property for 4 years, and then once they apply for the permanent residency, they are probably going to sell the property, but at that point in time, their money has been in the Brazilian economy for 4 years, turning the wheels. So that's the concept. Okay, now if you go by the letter of the law supporting the real estate investment track, even after you secure the permanent residency, you would be required to keep the property, right? So just this heads up that, for those who don't necessarily need to sell the property, ideally, I would tell you to keep it for as long as you need it, or maybe down the line, you're gonna, apply and secure the citizenship, and then of course you can sell the property. But I would not sell the property even after you secure the permanent residency. Something very interesting to note, like in Portuguese, the Brazilian immigration, industry, we don't say permanent residency. We actually say a residency for an undetermined period, right? And it's super weird the way it's written in Portuguese, but the whole concept about not saying permanent, it's exactly because the immigration wants to give you a heads up that they may take this away from you, right? And therefore, instead of calling permanent residency, the Brazilian immigration never says permanent resident. They usually say residency by an undetermined term, right? And the reason why I say permanent residency is because I want to use a more international common language. I think it is just too cumbersome and weird to say residency for an undetermined period of time, right? So I hope that was helpful. And all right, Bill is in the house, giving thumbs up. Thank you for your support, Bill. Clayton, we have a second Clayton today, and I'm almost sure Clayton is coming for a second time. Clayton says, Clayton Buckage, oi, boa tarde, é privilégio estar aqui hoje e sempre bom aprender mais sobre. The pleasure is all ours. Clayton is saying that he's coming for the knowledge, he's coming to learn. Pretty a humble person, and we appreciate your presence over here, Clayton. Thank you so much. Yokora is thanking for the sharing. There you go. There is Camila over there. Camila's email address. Camila is a Rio de Janeiro realtor, but she also works with other markets as well. Yui, thanks a lot. Thank you guys for participating. Let me take a look here at what else we have here in our backlog of questions. All right, so can you tell what's going to happen with the Brazilian real? Do you think the currency exchange rate is going to remain the same? We are planning to buy property for the Brazil real estate investment visa, but we are afraid the currency exchange may not be as favorable as it is now when we get to the point of buying, right? That's an interesting question. Listen, we, honestly, I have no clue if the rate is gonna, remain the same or if it's gonna get better or not. What I can do, I can actually, probably share with you, in terms of rates that, even though the rate has fallen a little bit, right? Like you can see, let's take a look at the history, right? Like for the last 3 months. So if you think about the last 3 months, dollar has lost strength when compared to the Brazilian real, right? So 6.2, the 6.2 you see over here, this was the peak of the US dollar buying R$ 6.20. That was the all-time a peak like in our history, right? Like since the beginning of times, that's as much, that was the peak acquisition power for the U.S. currency against the Brazilian real, right? But if you change that graphic, right, like if instead of thinking about 3 months, you think about 1 year, guess what? That's exactly the opposite, right? So even today, the exchange rate is so much better than it was a year ago. If you take a look, a year ago, a US dollar was buying basically R$ 5. And again, as of today, a US dollar is buying R$ 5.70. So what I'm trying to say here is that the US dollar is still pretty strong when you compare to the Brazilian real, right? Another nuance over here, another nuance is that Brazil has been traditionally a buyer's market. So, in addition to operating with a very strong currency when you come from the United States, another advantage is that it is a buyer's market, meaning that in many markets, like there are more properties being sold than buyers. So guess what? On top of the currency exchange advantage, you also have an advantage of buying as a cash buyer, right? Like because in Brazil, and I guess just like in the United States, right? Like I mean, most people or most families, they would buy with a mortgage, right? In the United States, usually people are not gonna buy on a cash basis. So if you are a cash basis buyer in Brazil, you're gonna have so many things to your favor. All right. So far from me, trying to predict the future, but what I can show you is like the past and the present, and then you guys will make up your minds in terms of the currency exchange rate. All right. So I hope that helps. All right. Let's take a look at our chat, how it's going. All right. Clayton Rodriguez, thank you. Thank you, Clayton, for participating. And again, very good to see you over here. Yue, quais são alguns bons sites para encontrar um lugar para alugar? Há algum site em inglês? Yue, so what I'm going to recommend you, right? And we can do this exercise here together, all right? I'm going to show you what you can do. And this is going to be helpful for any one of you trying to find properties in Brazil. So let's share my screen. I'm using Chrome, right? This is Chrome. And now we're gonna search for Zap, right? Zap Imóveis. And this is the largest portal for properties in Brazil. Zap Imóveis, right? I'm gonna share the URL later on, but let's say if you wanna, access this website in English, all you need to do is to right-click, and then you're gonna translate to English. Now, this is not gonna work for every single browser. This works for Chrome, right? So I'm using Chrome. I right-click, and now everything that I see over here is gonna be in English, right? Now, the downside is that this is obviously like machine translation, and the translation is not ideal, right? So here you see buy does make sense. Unfortunately, this would be like the lease or rental, and the translation is coming as to hire, right? But there you go. You may still use this thing, and if you do, for instance, Copacabana, all right? Copacabana, Rio de Janeiro, and then you click on it, and then you're gonna say the type of property. So let's say you wanna live in Copacabana. I know many people, they don't think Copacabana is a an ideal location in Rio. I do like Copacabana a lot. All right, so I'm gonna check rentals in Copacabana. I'm searching now for the rentals, and there you go. Now you can see over 500 apartments in Copacabana alone. So that's pretty amazing, right? Like in a single neighborhood in Rio de Janeiro, you have over 500 apartments for rental. And here you can see the amounts. They are gonna, of course, naturally advertise the amounts in a Brazilian currency. Here is like 3,000 reais a month, and 3,000 reais a month is gonna be less than 500 dollars a month in a pretty famous neighborhood, right? By the way, there is the HOA, right? Condominium fees means like the condo fees, or HOA, homeowners association fees, and so on. There is even stuff like for 1,000 reais, right? So less than 200, less than 200 reais, less than $200. Let's take a look at this property. All right, it's a pretty tiny one, more like a studio type of thing, right? This is a studio, but come on, for $200 a month in Copacabana, I mean, you can't complain, I guess. Okay, so this is one of the photos that I would recommend. As you can see, like if you right click, you're gonna get the machine translation. One bedroom, living room, kitchen, and bathroom. So it's not really, it is more like a studio because it's just 30 square meters, but they have it divided the unit in like separate rooms, close to subway station, various shops, 24-hour dormant, great opportunity. Okay, and by the way, I know these guys. APSA, right? I know these guys. I know their management actually. Their up management. I am friends with the director of sales for APSA, right? Pretty decent people. They've been in the market for, I don't know, like 70 years. They actually started their business. It was in, if I'm not mistaken, Rio Grande do Sul, all the way down in Brazil. And now they are in every single state. They're pretty conservative, pretty decent people, right? So the fact that it's being sold by APSA or being rented by APSA, I think it's is a major upside. All right. So there you go. That's how you do it. As you can see, you can leverage the machine translation to your favor. Zap Imóveis, in my opinion, is today the best portal for you guys to use. And let me share the link as promised. I'm gonna share the link. Almost there. All right, so there you go. This is the link for the portal I was sharing with you guys. That was for UA and of course everyone else. There are no websites in English. Camila has a website she's developing as you speak, and it's not fully functional. But this is going to be more, for the sale of real estate, and it's going to be in English. Okay, but websites with rental in English, like we don't actually have anything UA. So my recommendation is for you to use it like Zap, and just right click on Chrome, and then try to get by using the machine translation. Pedro is back. Welcome back, Pedro. I want to buy an apartment in Brazil. I don't want to pay until November. It is too early to contact the seller in June. Yes, Pedro. In our experience, like the ideal timeline for a foreign citizen to buy a property in Brazil is gonna be like 3 months between getting to the contract discussion stage and the closing, right? And of course, you're gonna need the money for the closing. So if your goal is November, we're gonna be talking about August, right? August, September, October, November, right? So 3 months. That would be my recommendation. But listen, like the shopping process, it could take like a couple of months. So let's say maybe you should pick something in August, and you could get started with the shopping process, let's say in June or July. That would be my recommendation, Pedro. I hope that makes sense. Yue, thanks. Are there any common scams or things foreigners need to know before renting? Well, a major thing, Yue, is like landlords. They don't like foreign citizens who are renting with a passport, right? Like it just sounds like a bad idea to rent an apartment to someone who's coming with a passport because and that's a nuance you don't know about. But in Brazil, it's pretty difficult. It's pretty difficult for a landlord to kick out a tenant, right? And Brazil has some weird laws, and like the landlord laws, they are one of them. If you are in New York, for instance, right, like in pretty common in New York, if you rent an apartment, landlords they could come over, whenever they want. They don't care if you are home. They don't care if you're traveling. They don't care if they don't care about anything. They can come into your property at any time and inspect things, and I don't know, confront you in case you're not paying the lease. Not in Brazil. In Brazil is the exact opposite. Landlords cannot enter the property unless they give you notice and you agree with the notice, and the notice is giving a lot of many days ahead of time, and the courts are very protective of the tenant, right? So because of that, a landlord would be concerned to rent an apartment to a foreign citizen. Maybe this foreign citizen, I don't know, like, I mean, they go back to their country a month down the road. They just, lock the apartment and cut communication with the landlord. And the landlord is going to need to pay an attorney to get possession back for the apartment, potentially having to pay a lot of money to this attorney and not recovering any monies from the foreign citizen who went back home, right? So landlords are going to factor that into their evaluation of you as a prospective tenant. And what we see is that many times they're going to be asking you for not only 6 months of security deposit, but very commonly even for a full year of security deposit, or pretty much prepaying the entire period of 1 year. All right, and I do think it makes sense, particularly when you put yourself in the landlord shoes. All right, now. When you get the resident card, right? Like let's say you're no longer just like the foreign citizen coming with a passport, right? Like let's say you get the digital nomad, you get the digital nomad visa, and now you get this beautiful thing. Now you have the resident card, right? So when you show up with the resident card, the landlord, and I gotta be honest with you, even when you have the R&M card, the landlord is still gonna be a little bit, concerned about the fact that you are a foreign citizen, but not nearly as much as he would be if you are showing up with a passport, because when you show the R&M card, the landlord realizes, your card is of a resident, a legal resident in Brazil. And more than that, just like visually, this card resembles our own IDs as Brazilians. So, all of a sudden, you're not like that foreign citizen who can go back to your country at any time. The landlord starts to see you as a hybrid between a foreign citizen and a Brazilian, right? You are in your transition to become a Brazilian, if you will, right? So when you get the R&M card, most of the time you're gonna have, a much better shot of getting a rental, without having to prepay this thing for an entire year. Okay, so that's I think the main point I can share about the process of renting as a foreign citizen. Now, in terms of scams, Rio de Janeiro is pretty big in terms of scams in real estate, right? Like, and I did record a couple of videos just like sharing very, sad, horrible terror stories about people or foreign citizens, like trying to buy real estate. But in terms of the rental, because the amounts are smaller, I would say the risks are, not as big as it would be for when you're buying. real estate, but I would recommend you to stick to a kind of well-established real estate agency when you're renting, and you should be fine, right? So I'm gonna share this agency here. They're pretty good for rentals. That's the APSA. That's the same thing I was showing to you guys on the screen, right? Like, I mean, and just to let you know how much we like these guys. That's where we went to rent our first office ever in Rio de Janeiro, right? Years ago, several years ago, that's who we used to rent our first office in Rio de Janeiro. Nowadays, we have like our own office. We are not renting anymore, particularly because of the experience we wanted to give to foreign citizens when they come to our office, and we couldn't change things, right? Because we were renting. So nowadays, the firm owns the place, and we have like the logo mark. We have our logo. We have a really nice a place for foreign citizens to come to our office to have some coffee with us, to meet with us. We have everything that we think foreign citizens should have when meeting with us in Rio de Janeiro. All right. But there you go, APSA. That's the one I would recommend for you guys to try a rental, either in Rio de Janeiro or elsewhere, by the way. Aaron, with a prenuptial and total separation of assets regime, what risks does marriage and childbirth pose to foreigners? Yeah, so Aaron, like prenuptials, like in Brazil, they don't have they don't hold a lot of water, unfortunately, right? Like Brazil is pretty attached to family law, which, by the way, it's on federal level, and judges are pretty quick to ignore a prenuptial agreement when they think that the terms of the prenuptial are not fair, right? Or let me give you a very clear and specific example. Let's say you are you are a lawyer, right? And you happen to find a lawyer in Brazil. You develop a relationship with this lawyer, so you have two lawyers in this relationship, right? And you guys set up a prenuptial saying, listen, we're not going to commingle assets. We're going to keep assets separate based on the total separation of assets regime, and there's not going to be any support at all. And then tragically, something happens to your partner lawyer, right? With your partner, romantic partner who happens to be a lawyer. Maybe you guys have a law firm together, but because of like this accident with your partner, she becomes disabled. If she becomes disabled, I guarantee it does not matter what the prenuptial agreement says, you're going to be on the hook to support this person for the remainder of your life. All right. So that's how the Brazilian legal system works. Like, if we don't think it's fair, forget about your prenuptial agreement. That's not going to hold any water. Right. Now, if you guys, eventually break up, there is no more relationships, and a relationship, and the prenuptial says no support, no commingling of assets, and you guys are on the same level, a judge would never go against the prenuptial, because then there is no need for the judge to go against the prenuptial. The situation is pretty fair from the judge's perspective. Okay, so that's more a piece of information for you to consider whenever you're following, the route of a marriage or união estável. On the other hand, nowadays sometimes marriage is at least as safe as união estável, because at least with the marriage you can set up the total separation of assets. You can have a prenuptial, and if you just keep the relationship going, eventually your partner could file for a união estável, a claim against you, and then there's not going to be anything kind of explaining what was the understanding of the situation, right? So for the marriage, you can have the prenuptial, you can have the total separation of assets, but if you don't do nothing, if you don't do anything, guess what? Down the road, someone could file a claim, and then, of course, when this person files a claim for união estável, uh, you don't have a window of opportunity to get a prenuptial in place, right? So, not something that I'm saying, but something that I heard from clients many times, and I think it's so interesting. They say, listen, it sounds to me that marriage is actually safer than união estável, right? Which shows how absurd Brazilian law has become in terms of união estável, right? União estável, or the common law marriage, or a civil union, 20 years ago, it was pretty reasonable, right? Like 20 years ago, união estável would exist to basically be a safeguard for a partner who has been living with another partner for 20 years, and then this partner dies, and to not let this surviving partner without any remedies, there would be a claim for união estável to give something to this surviving partner, right? So it made sense like 20 years ago because it was a safeguard to avoid, like injustice. But nowadays, it's the exact opposite. Like the Brazilian higher courts, they equated the união estável, common law marriage, to the marriage, which makes no sense, right? Like if people have not decided for the marriage, you shouldn't be, forcing up marriage to these people. But that's exactly what's happening in Brazil today, right? Okay, so I wanna, say thank you for your participation. We are arriving at the end of our live stream. If you haven't liked our live stream so far, give us a shot, click on the like button. Our next live stream is gonna be on Wednesday. And on Wednesday, remember, we don't meet at 3:30, we actually meet at 12:30 Rio de Janeiro time. I hope to see you again, and wishing you all a blessed rest of your Sunday.